Some people like to live in the same place like my parents for 38 years. And for me, that idea kind of freaks me out a bit.
That's probably the rise of rentvesting as a strategy.
This is actually not where I want to live. Now let's move on to where I actually want to live for the lifestyle.
So as long as the numbers make sense, pull the trigger on it.
Nah, we'll just make it happen.
So true. So true. Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's been fun.
Welcome back to another episode of That Backyard Property Podcast. Today is episode 20, and I'm very excited. We have an expert in the property game, Steve Williams, Director, W Property Advisory. Welcome.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Yeah. You've flown in all the way from sunny GC.
I did, yeah. Bit of a hike, but yeah, good to be back in Perth. I loved living here, and it's always good to come back and see everyone.
Yeah. So, buyer's agent, property advisor. How did you get into that game?
Yeah, good question. So I started investing in property about 16 years ago, and it's something I dabbled in on the side, and it kind of started a little bit differently. I wasn't like, I want to be a buyer's agent. I actually, I was driving between Canberra and Sydney, and I was working at Centrelink because my job got shut down during COVID. And I was driving like near Lake George, you probably know Lake George. And I had this I was like, whoa, I actually want to help people with getting ahead financially. And it just hit me, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. Yeah. And then not long after, I kind of came across the concept of a buyer's agent, never heard of it before. I was like, actually, that is quite valuable. And like property, you make good money from it. You can if you do it right. Yeah. Why not become a buyer's agent, which I can help people get ahead? Yeah. And that's really where I started. Yeah. And that's why I got into it.
That's such a good way to start this, because we're going to tackle all things rentvesting, buyer's agents, market hotspots, and everything alike today, which is going to be exciting. But I always love chatting about what a home means, because you're involved in so many transactions for your clients, whether that be them buying their own property or whether they're buying investment. But what does home actually mean to you?
Ooh, that's a good one. I am a bit of a nomad. I've lived in a lot of places, and I'd probably say home is really within for me, and everyone's experience is different. Some people like to live in the same place like my parents for 38 years, and for me that idea kind of freaks me out a bit. I've been really lucky with my career. I've had the chance to live. I'm from Canberra, but I've lived in Sydney, Melbourne. I lived in New York, back to Sydney, Perth, and now Queensland, and I've got to really get to know the country quite well. So for me, it's really where I make it. And I think everywhere you go, it's about the connections you have with people, how you feel when you're there. I think that feeling of comfort, safety, and just, peace as well, right? That's where I find it. And everywhere I go, I always love it. I loved Melbourne, then I love Sydney, then I love New York, and then you just kind of evolve. And I think that adds to your journey and who you are. That's me. But for some people, they want to have that stability and have the comfort and just live in the same place for their entire life.
Do you think there's a bit of a change in societal pressures and views on that as well? As you said, mum and dad in a home for 30 years, my parents have the same thing. And I think that generation was all around get the property, pay the debt down, and just live there and bunker in forever. And I feel like there is just a bit of a shift in people being able to move around and be a nomad.
Yeah, look, I think, it'd be interesting to see whether younger people today do like to be a bit more nomadic. I'd probably say, a lot of people, their career is a big part of what they want to do. And sometimes you need to move for your career. And that was part of why I moved. And it allowed me to have, really go up the levels with my career. But a lot of people do want to experience life. But the other part of it as well is I think the complexities of the housing situation, you have to think outside the box, because it's not just a matter of you grow up and then you go buy a house down the road from your parents. Sometimes it's not doable. I spoke to some people the other day. Their parents live in Seaforth in Sydney, quite an expensive area, and they're just we're never going to be able to afford anything near our parents. And so they're renting where they can, but they're open to moving to have somewhere they can call home themselves in the future. I think it's definitely changed.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably the rise of rentvesting as a strategy for both living where you want to, but still being able to get on that property ladder.
Yeah, look, and rentvesting is my thing. I did that from when I was 23. I was living in Melbourne, couldn't afford to live in Melbourne. I could buy an apartment, but I just knew probably wasn't the best investment. And then I bought a house in Canberra, and that was really my start with property. And I've basically rent-vested for about 16 years, except for a short period where, like, if it makes sense to move into the property because it's in a growing market, and then obviously there's tax benefits and stuff like that, moving into that property for a short while. But then I was like, look, this is actually not where I want to live. Now let's move on to, where I actually want to live for the lifestyle.
Yeah. And so I guess hopefully you lived in your Perth property over the last couple of years for a period of time.
I actually moved, even within Perth, I moved a couple of times. I had the chance to live in Freo. I lived in the Swan Valley, which was beautiful, and then not far from the city. And then I had my place towards the end of my time here in Perth. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your relationship with property? Like, how's that changed over time, given you started buying when you're 23 and even touching on the point of you didn't believe that an apartment was probably the best investment. Where did that knowledge come from, and kind of how's it going?
Well, I didn't take my own advice because my second property was an apartment in Melbourne, and I actually bought it because I did want to live in that one for a short while. So I bought it in St Kilda. I thought, cool suburb, great place to live. It's like Bondi. Bondi is now $1 million. St Kilda's $500,000, and it's all I could afford. So I bought that for the second property, and I lived in that for the year, so I could get benefits and stuff like that. That property literally grew maybe 100,000 in 14 years, but it was negatively geared by about 300 to 400 a week. So if you do the sums on that, I actually went backwards. Plus, if I had have invested somewhere like, a growth market, a house in a growth market, I calculated it not long ago. The opportunity cost was like $500,000. And I don't want to think about it anymore, but like if I had have bought, like, instead of that apartment buy in the right place, I would be way, way ahead, but you learn.
Yeah, the opportunity. My first place that I bought was in Darwin, because that's where I was living at the time. And the money that I spent there could have bought something okay in Sydney in 2011, 2012.
Yeah, wow.
Which, same thing, I'd hate to think. Yeah. That went backwards and never got back to where I bought it. Wow. So took a loss and where it could have been. But I think you learn from those mistakes. And
you do. And I think like you often, we're busy people, and like we're in our little bubble of life, and we forget that there's actually the whole country and there's 15,000 suburbs, right? So knowing where different markets are at is so important, because and that's the reason why I bought St Kilda, because I just knew that little pocket and I thought, yeah, that looks cool. But if I had to look more broadly, much better options.
And do you think when you're talking with clients, you're bringing that experience with you whenever you're talking about advising them on markets to buy in?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Look, I do kind of share my story a bit, because I think learning from your mistakes, like, it makes you stronger, and it really paints the picture of what's achievable if you do it right. And look, some people do come with their preconceived ideas of what's important for them, or maybe their family told them they need to do something, or etc. So I can only educate and share my experience. And I mean, I guess that's the thing. If you do speak to the right people or get the right advice, like back when I bought, when was that? I think it was like 14 years ago. It was much harder to get information back then. Like there was no, I mean, there may have been, but I wasn't aware of podcasts or YouTubes or even professionals to speak to. And I think now it's just much more easy to get more, I guess, valuable and accurate advice than rely on yourself.
And be misled as well, which
we can
touch on because it is so accessible. Yeah. And I feel that when I'm talking with a lot of clients from the lending perspective that they've bought and they want to use their equity or the value in their property to buy an investment, they're like, okay, we'll buy in the suburb that we're already in. Yeah. Oh, are you sure you want to do that? Well, I saw a YouTube video that said I should buy in this, and you go, okay, maybe we need to broaden your research as well.
And some people, they like being able to drive past it. Like it kind of gives you a little bit of I own that. Yeah. But really, like a lot of my clients that we bought for, they've actually still never seen their property. They've had them for years. They've still never seen it. It's just out of mind, out of sight. And I think it's actually probably it reduces the stress a bit, because when you see your property, you're like, oh, there's a crack on the wall and this and that. But that stuff doesn't matter with property investing, right?
No, it's purely numbers.
Yeah.
There's no real emotional attachment to it.
Yeah.
And so as long as the numbers make sense, then you can pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, I think that comes back to your question before. You said, like, how have you changed with investing? Like, back then I did take it really seriously, and like I didn't understand, I'd see a crack in the wall and it would freak me out. But now, having been through hundreds, if not 1,000 houses, like all these little things, they actually don't really matter. It's about the location you buy in, what the market's doing. I have one of the dodgiest houses in a suburb called Coolbellup here in Perth. Yeah. And I bought it because it's all I could afford, but I knew it was a great suburb. I knew it was going to take off. And it's done tremendously well. It's increased in value by like 200 grand. I fixed some leaky taps and stuff like that. Haven't spent any money on it. But if you look at it, you'd be like, oof, right, like why would you buy that?
Well, if you had said you were going to buy in Coolbellup 5-10 years ago, people would have said, that well-meaning auntie or uncle would have said, don't buy there. You'll never get growth.
100%, yeah.
And is that the property that you're going to do some work on and do a development on?
Yeah, so my strategy for that one, I really bought it for the development potential. Like, it's a great spot. You got close to Murdoch University. You've got the hospital nearby, and it's just a great pocket close to Freo. Freo is Freo is one of my favorite places in the country. I love Freo, and you've got this chance to really build out the back. You do need to make sure the numbers stack up. Sometimes they don't, but given there's been the growth, and like if you build a house now for like 450,000, like a 3x2, they're selling for 800,000, which is crazy. So there's a huge uplift potential.
So what are your plans with it? What's the plans and what's the process? How do you get this sort of thing off the ground?
Yeah, look, asking lots of questions to professionals. Now, I've done duplexes before, but in Canberra, and it's a bit different over here. I'd probably say it's a little bit easier over here. The government's quite pro-development, which was great. Like, we had to pay, when you did over there, you have to pay taxes, as you split the blocks, quite a substantial amount of money. Like, I'm talking.
So as soon as you subdivide the blocks.
Yeah. It was like, I think it was like 30,000 per lot or something. This was a while back, but it's probably even more now. But here, it's definitely a little bit easier. But my plan for it is to, I'm really trying to build the cash flow up. And the goal is to actually build. I was looking at co-living. Doesn't really suit the block. It's only a 300 square metre block out the back. So I'm actually going to create a dual living. So it's actually a 3x2, but it's split into a 2x1 and a 1x1. Yeah. And as a result from that, the cash flow is probably going to be over maybe 1,000, 1,100 a week, which, like, the ROI on a build for 450, that's pretty healthy.
Yeah. So what, you would knock it down and then rebuild?
Retain. Yeah. So I'm going to retain the house out the front and then build out the back. There's potential I could knock the house down at the front, but if you do the numbers, it doesn't quite.
Yeah, so there's enough room out the back to do that.
Yeah. Coolbellup's a good suburb for that. Yeah. There's people do it all the time. The house prices have obviously jumped up a lot, so it's making it harder to get into that market. But yeah, look, and it's not the only place. There's places across the country, typically the more established suburbs. There's always little opportunities like that.
It's exciting. And when you bought that property, was that always in mind?
Yeah. I thought, get into a suburb, like a good suburb, something I can afford. Every other house in that suburb was selling for like 600,000. I bought that one for 540. And that was the plan, and it's actually worked out well. Yeah, so far.
It's nice when the plans do actually come to fruition.
It does, yeah. I'll wait till it's built, but yeah, number-wise, it looks good.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
And so is that what's taken you over to the other side of the country, being Queensland and the Gold Coast, with opportunities that you're seeing over there?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a big advocate for borderless investing. It goes back to what you said before, like you said, people buying in their backyard, right? And there is more suburbs than that. So by essentially, Perth was the hotspot the last couple of years, and there's still tremendous value here if you buy right. But the market has definitely cooled off with interstate investors, which is probably a good thing, because it means that local people can have, a chance with a bit less competition. And we're going to see growth still here. But there's other markets across the country. I work with a lot of my clients that go on to buy 2, 3, 4 properties. And so they want to diversify. And diversification is critical, right? If you've got all your eggs in one basket like Perth, then you're going to find that if the market turns, it's going to hurt a little bit. Whereas if you've got another location that's in a different market cycle, it's gonna, I guess, you're gonna feel a bit better. So I really believe in diversification. And so that's why I moved there, because clients are wanting to move over, will buy over there now.
Yeah. And you said you're helping people that are buying their third, fourth, maybe fifth or sixth property. What are some common traits or themes that you see in those people?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this recently, and some people are bull at a gate. They're like, if there's an opportunity, I am going for it. And they literally will, as soon as they've got equity, they'll extract the equity and they'll just go for it. And I think they're the ones that get ahead because they're taking action. Stuff doesn't happen if you don't take action. And I get really inspired and motivated by these people, because it's almost like they've got no fear, or like they're just like, nah, we'll just make it happen. Whereas other people, they're a lot more cautious. Oh, we'll just give one a go. We'll just wait a little bit. And also they're busy people, right? So we get caught up in our day-to-day with work, but the funny thing is, right, you can wait. Some clients that have bought properties a year ago, they've actually made more money through the equity growth than what they have from their salary, with an investment of maybe like 5 hours of signing some documents and speaking to a professional.
It's so true. It's so true. There's one of the best brokers in the country over in Sydney, Aaron Chrissy Davids, and one of his strong quotes is, the property market rewards action takers and decision makers.
100%.
What you said is spot on. And you do get caught up in your day-to-day. And it's hard to look past the day-to-day. But if you are able to achieve growth in a property that is more than your salary, then at some point that's going to pay off.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. And like, in terms of those people, what's the vision for them? Do you have a lot of the people you're helping are the ones that are wanting 10 or 15 properties, or are they going, look, we just want one or two?
Yeah, a very broad spectrum. And I think some people either have it clear in what they want, or they're just hearing what somebody else says and then following somebody else. So the reason why we're called W Property Advisory, so the W stands for why, where, what, right? A lot of people, they just get their money and they go to the where, but they don't think about the why. And I think if you get really clear on what your why is and like visualize that, I believe in visualization and all that sort of stuff. It's really powerful. And if you're clear on like, why am I doing this? Because I want to either provide security for my family, I want to build up my equity so I potentially don't have to work in the future, or, I mean, there's all matter of reasons. So if you're really clear on that, and then that's going to really motivate and, I guess, inspire you to go on. So I think getting really clear on that is going to get you along the way. And then essentially, because when you're buying property, it needs to be aligned with that goal as well, right? Because if you want to retire in 5-10 years and you're buying a property that's heavily negatively geared, then that's not going to align with your why.
No, you buy that St Kilda property and it's costing you $300-400 a month. In addition to
and also doing nothing. So
yes, it's properties are fascinating. It's so illiquid. It's so hard to move on, and sometimes that's a good thing because you can't just quickly sell and get the cash. Buyers agents in Australia has become quite prolific, same as mortgage brokers. So I feel like both of them have come hand in hand with the way the property market's moved over the last 10 years. And buyers agents existed well before this sort of cycle, and so did mortgage brokers. But I find that where there's money, there's people. And so from a buyer's agent's perspective, what are you seeing out there from the industry, and is there more regulation around the advice that can be provided?
So what am I seeing around the industry? Well, I guess like from international, buyer's agents are massive in the US. Like more than 70% of people use a buyer's agent. It's very common. Whereas here, I'd probably say it's less than 5%.
Wow.
Maybe even a couple of percent. And every area is different. Like Sydney, a lot more common to use a buyer's agent. Quite new here in WA, and a lot of because we buy for clients here in Perth, both for residential and for investment. And it's an education process of helping them understand, like, what do we actually do? And as someone, like, if I wasn't a buyer's agent, I'd be like, look, there is tremendous value, huge value in what we offer. especially people who don't really quite know what they're doing. But even those who do know, maybe they're short on time or whatever it is. In terms of, so obviously to be a buyer's agent, you need a real estate license. So you're essentially, a sales agent, but representing the buyer. Yeah. And that's the only real difference. So yeah, quite a new concept in Australia. And I think it's definitely growing. And I think what is it? 70% of people use a mortgage broker. Yeah. So I think it's just going to be a matter of time before people will be like, I can't buy unless I have a buyer's agent.
Oh, I guess that comes into that borderless vision. So what I know in Perth is completely different to my knowledge in the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And if I'm trying to buy a property there, time, yes, but knowledge and experience is why I would recommend using a buyer's agent, especially in a market you don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's a whole range of different benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the?
Yeah. Well, look, I would say so. Firstly, it's getting okay. I'll start with this. Like some people don't have the confidence or the motivation to buy a property. I've spoken to people who've been trying to buy a property for years. And with anything, I feel like when you pay for something, it's like if you pay for personal training or if you pay for, I don't know, a consultant in your business or a business mentor or whatever, it means you're going to do it. And often the more you pay for something, the more value you're going to go for it, right? So for our clients, we buy in 3 to 5 weeks. And that's the average. Yeah. And if you're committed to buying a property, you pay for someone to help you, you're going to get a property. A lot of people, they sit waiting for months and months, property prices are going up. I saw this in back in the growth spurt last year, right? I actually said to people, I said, if you pay for a buyer's agent, then if you get a property 1 month quicker, you've made the money in growth. So that's probably number one. 2 is, of course, the research and understanding, is it the right market to buy in? Like I actually had a lady, I remember this story, had a lady call me and she lived in Yangebup in Perth. And she said, I spoke to a sales agent and they said it's a really good time to sell. I'm like, okay, cool. Like talk me through this. He's like, yeah, he said I should sell my property and then buy an apartment and then wait for the market to correct and then buy a house when the market's dropped. I'm like, okay, cool. The market's about to boom here. If you sell your property, you're going to be backwards hundreds of thousands of dollars in a few years. And it took a bit for her to understand that, but I don't know. I haven't spoken to her because she didn't become a client, but I just hope she held her property because she would have made $200,000. The prices went from $500,000 to $700,000. So that's just an example of like the research. Like buyer's agents come from a different perspective. They're on the buyer's side. They're not trying to sell the property. So there's that, and then there's all the due diligence, right? So you want to check bushfire zones, flooding zones, heritage overlays, public housing potential challenges. You want to look at easements, all that sort of stuff, which we just make that process easy. And that's really that. And then just, holding, and then off-market opportunities, right? And there's all the on-markets, then off-markets. Now, not all off-markets are good properties or good investments or whatever. You have to filter through a lot, but we can just get access to more opportunities.
And the negotiation with an agent. I guess
yes, absolutely.
I see that as being something that's quite valuable because if you're only buying 1 or 2 properties in your lifetime, your ability to negotiate with an agent over something that could be worth $1 million can be overwhelming. Which should be overwhelming because you haven't done it before.
That's it.
And so I see that as being quite a good value add as well.
Well, yeah, look, people were struggling to buy, and they are now in some pockets in Perth or other hot markets across the country. They don't know what offer to put in, and especially if it's a best and final, people look at the online estimates on realestate.com.au or whatever, and they think that's what a property is worth. It's so incorrect. You really have to, it's a bit of a science to it, I think, and a bit of an art as well. But yeah, negotiation is critical because you don't want to overpay too much, but you don't want to miss out. So it's that fine line.
Yeah. And you're doing, how many transactions a month with agents and understanding the ins and outs of the process with them?
Yeah, look, and every market's different. All different, right? Most sales in Perth are best and final. You don't get a chance to go back again. Other markets, there's auctions, which are a different kettle of fish. And sometimes you do get a chance to go back and forth a little bit. So it's about asking the right questions of the agents, understand the process. And I think as well is like some people like hold their cards really close and they're like, I'm not playing the game. I don't want to play this game. Like the agent's trying to rip me off. like you kind of have to play the game when you're buying a property when it's competitive. Like you need to learn to read the signals. You need to take the tone of voice, ask more questions, because sometimes they're actually trying to, give you a leg up to get the deal done, and you need to learn to read the signals. Yeah.
I find that one of the hard parts where obviously we're helping so many buyers on the same side that you're on. And I know so many real estate agents, and so many of them are really good people. Yep. And they're really good at their jobs. There are obviously some average ones like there is in any industry. And so it's quite hard because a buyer's already going into the negotiation or transaction expecting to be ripped off, when the reality is that the agent is probably trying to make it a fair offer or fair negotiation as well. Do you find that as being something that you see a lot, that the selling agent isn't just trying to rip someone off?
Yeah, look, I mean, the sales agents have what we call a fiduciary duty to represent the seller and get the best price possible. So that's their job. And if they achieve that, they've done their job. So it is true. Sometimes, a lot of agents are very helpful, and they do work with the buyers. And with negotiation, it's all just win-win. And it's about having a happy buyer and a happy seller. That's the ideal, I guess, outcome. But I would say that, you just need to read to learn the signals. Everybody's different. They have different approaches. You also need to work out, like if it is an investment, you don't want to go in too hard, right? Because if you overpay, then it's about investment. But if you want to live in it, and that's your dream home, and it's unlikely something like that's going to come up again, you just have to work with them really hard and be, some people turn their back up a little bit, but you really have to build rapport with them, because that's when you're going to get the help you need.
Yeah. No, I see it time and time again. Property markets in Australia are so different from state to state, suburb to suburb, city to city. Like they're all so vastly different. What are you seeing at the moment on the ground level from a market movement perspective within different cities?
Yeah, look, with our clients, we always start again with their end goal and their why, right? And then I ask a whole heap of questions to work out where the right place to buy is. Now, it also comes down to risk as well, like what risk tolerance. There's always risk with property. Some locations are higher risk than others. Often when there's higher risk, there's a better payoff, but you've just got that, I guess, fluctuations you got to manage. What we're seeing, like especially with the advent of like social media and YouTube, people talk about locations, and then humans, a lot of them in investment space, they're a little bit sheepish and they're kind of following the flock, right? So everyone was talking about Perth the last few years, everyone was over here, and now everyone's talking about Melbourne, for example, so everyone's flocking over there. Also, the numbers do relatively make sense. Like, even though the yields are way better in Perth, Melbourne has growth potential. It's a little bit undervalued. It's the largest city by population in the country. Yeah. So in terms of like what I'm seeing on the ground, markets are all different. Melbourne is very competitive, probably more competitive now than what Perth is at the lower end, even though the data doesn't show that. Like it was negative 2.4% in the last 12 months. So you need to like see what's going on the ground, because it's often very different to what the data says. But definitely what I'm seeing is places like Melbourne, Brisbane's still performing really well. Sunshine Coast, regional parts of Queensland, regional Victoria are really starting to take off. Local investors in Perth are definitely starting to, I guess, more so get their confidence, and also they've got equity now, right? So they're now wanting to invest. But I think, at the moment, most people are targeting Melbourne, but it's not, in my opinion, the right location for everybody. It's actually a lot harder as an investor there, because you've got land taxes, you've got compliance, you've got a whole heap of, I guess, things that make it difficult. Mm-hmm. So you need to work out what you're comfortable with.
And what are some of those metrics that you weigh up when you are looking for a market? Yeah,
look, really property, again, let's start with the goal. So if you're looking for growth, there's different metrics in terms of supply and demand, and it's just economics. Prices go up when there's an imbalance with supply and demand. And we can measure demand. We can look at the days on market, how fast properties are selling. We can look at the number of properties on the market, how If that's decreasing, it means the stock is, I guess, reducing. We can also look at even online search volumes. We can see how many people are searching in a suburb, and if it's starting to increase, that's normally a lead indicator that there's going to be more people start to buy there. And then we've also got things like building approval levels. Like, we don't want to be in a location where there's too much development, because it just means more competition for your property. That's all they're the key ones for buying. But if you're buying it for an investment, if you're going to get tenants in there, you want to be in a place where the vacancy rate is not too high. Ideally, under 1%, great. Even under 2% is okay. But you want to know that you're going to get tenants there. So that's the other thing. And they're normally the lead indicators. And then I always say, when there's 5 people going for a property, 4 people miss out. Those 4 people, they're going to come back with a vengeance, and they're going to bid higher and higher for the next one. And that's when prices go up.
Yeah. It's talking with any of our clients that are buying in Melbourne for owner occupied. I don't have that many that are buying there for an investment yet, but just to live in, it's quite fascinating listening to their points around home opens and auctions that they're going to is very similar to the perspectives of the buyers that I was helping in 2020, 2021 here, in terms of frustration about the level of people, the level of competition, and the discussion points within a home open. So it's quite interesting seeing the similarities, not to say that the market's going to do the same thing at all, but some of that on the ground movement happens years before the market actually catches up with it.
Yeah, that's right. And the data, it is delayed, of course, sometimes months delayed. But yeah, you're right. And you can't measure that stuff because it's the future. But yeah, if you're seeing that a market, there's people at open homes, there's people missing out, there's frustration, normally you'll see that prices are going to grow. And look, with that as well, like Perth, we saw that the stock increased early this year, and people were like, oh, we're done. But it's starting to drop again. And we actually, in this last week, we actually had more properties selling this last week than in the same week last year. We had 922 sell in Perth. Last year was about 850 in the same week. So
wow,
I feel like there might be second wind, but we'll see.
Oh, look, there's so much fatigue at the end of last year in Perth.
Yeah.
Buyers
you can't get your head around it, can you?
Buyers, sellers, settlement agents, conveyancers, mortgage brokers, everyone was just pretty knackered after, 2 years of hectic growth. So, yeah, you're right. I think there probably will be a bit of a second wind, but nowhere near the 30% or 21%
Agree.
or year on year. That's just not possible. No. Who do you turn to for inspiration or advice in this space?
As in property or buyers agents? Yeah. Look, I there's a lot of people that I kind of turn to get different. I think it's important to get different perspectives as well. I look to my accountant. Is a great guy, Jeremy, and he's invested himself and always gives me good advice. And it's good to have a good accountant in your pocket. Always recommend that. You definitely like some of the research. Terry Ryder, for example, gives a good perspective of a place, not just from the numbers, but also from what is actually going on in that location, which could cause growth. They're great. And I get inspired by just speaking to investors that are doing it. Yeah. And there's a whole heap of people I could name, but just seeing what they do, what works, and also learning from their failures as well, so I don't hopefully make them. That's who I turn to.
Yeah, Terry Ryder is one of those experts that I always look to. His hot spotting is certainly not a cash grab or anything like that. He's a really diligent researcher that provides great content. So I find Terry Ryder and what I find as well is Louis Christopher from SQM Research. Yes. Fantastic insight into the property market, and so those two as well are the ones that I would look to. If anyone out there is wanting to just have a squiz at the property market and what investment could look like from a property perspective, those two are awesome. But an accountant, especially an accountant that invests, is important. One that obviously looks after your tax and advice and strategy is incredibly important, but you also want someone that's also trying to grow with you as well.
100%. Yeah, it makes Makes a big difference, yeah.
Yeah. And 5 years ahead, what's Steve Williams doing?
What am I doing? Well, look, I feel like we have a huge opportunity with our business to expand, to help more people. I think what I'd be most excited about in 5 years, I recently went to Sydney and caught up with some clients that I bought for 2-3 years ago, and their properties have grown, and like you're just like, whoa, like they've actually, done really well.
You've changed their lives.
Yeah. Like I could tell you countless stories of people who like they just feel comfortable now, because finance, it can make a big difference to how you feel on a day-to-day basis. Like if you've got assets and you've got some comfort and security, it changes your life. So anyway, in 5 years, like I really want to see how my clients have done and like look back at it and be like, wow, I'm glad we made that call, right? And we do it together as a team, like it's their decision, but I help guide them on that. And yeah, look, really just impact more people, really. And like I'm expanding my portfolio as well. Like I've tried different things here and there. Who knows? There's so many opportunities, isn't there?
There is, and as soon as you mentioned that, I caught up with one of the clients I helped 3.5 years ago. Yeah. So she was working at Woolies, working at Woolies in her early 20s, and was stacking shelves after hours as well. So putting in all the effort and squirreling away all of her money. And so sat down with her, and she wanted to buy a house and land for $400,000 and a few years ago. And so caught up with her again yesterday, and all of her friends are now ready to buy a home. And she's like, I don't know what mine's worth. Hopefully it's worth $450, maybe $500. So let's just do a valuation, a computer valuation, which I know is not real, but it definitely helps to give you an idea. Yeah. So I did a computer valuation, $760.
Yeah, wow.
And over the Zoom call together, and you're just listening to this person that worked so hard 3 years ago, that did something that none of her friends were doing and achieved this, and now all of her friends can't buy because they have been priced out in that particular area. And you're just listening to that impact and going, this is a real life scenario of someone who worked hard, took action. Mm-hmm. She's considering herself lucky, which I don't believe is true. I feel that she earned every penny of that. And now she's got a property worth $760. And as I said to her, that doesn't help you pay your bills because it's still cost of living is still high. Yeah. But as you said, knowing that there's some value in your property and your financial position has increased is empowering.
It is, yeah.
And you must see that with so many investors that you've helped.
Yeah, it's I had a similar one. I had a single mum, couldn't afford to buy in Wollongong. She had her deposit saved. She didn't know where to buy. She was quite stressed. We bought for her in Perth. The property we bought at $465,000. That property is now worth over $600,000. It actually grew to $590 in about 8 months, and she's just over the moon. And she's a single mum with a kid, and that comfort that it's given her, knowing that that she's not going to fall behind, and that for me was like, cool. I love what I do. Yeah, you've taken that person into this new level, which they probably, before they met you, probably didn't even believe that they could do it. Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned earlier on about the confidence that you can get from someone like yourself in this space, it's invaluable. Yes, agreed.
It truly is. Podcasting.
Yeah.
What have you learned?
Well,
you're doing your own podcast.
Oh, my podcast. Yeah. Look, I started podcasting early this year. I love it. I think a big part of it is the research you do in the lead up to it. So you actually learn, they say you learn by teaching. And I mean, a lot of it I do from my experience, but I'm also questioning myself and my approaches to be like, how can I be better? And I've loved it. It's been great. I've had some different guests on there. I've also shared some of my wisdom. It was funny. I had a guy call up the other day, and he works at a prison and has been working hard all of his life. He's in his 50s, and he goes, I've just moved out of my home and I'm going to become a rentvester. I was listening to your podcast. I'm like, that's so cool. So he's now moved into a shared house, and he's paying like diddly squat rent, like 200 and something a week rent. And it's actually enabling him to now go and buy a second property because he's got a goal in 10 or 15 years to retire. So it just amazes me, like people listen to your suggestions or your story and get inspired. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's been fun.
It's hard work.
It is.
It's hard
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
It's quite confronting as well, but
Yeah.
it's amazing when you do hear that someone listening is, that I could actually take action on that.
Yeah, exactly. I think as you said, with hard work, like I always feel a bit of tension before I go to do it. And they say like if something feels like it's hard, you need to lean into it because that's where you're going to get ahead and that's where you're going to make a difference.
Oh, mate, I'm singing off the same hymn sheet. If something's uncomfortable, I know that I have to do it.
Exactly.
And that's how this podcast ended up starting as well.
Yeah.
Talking about being proud of ourselves. I love finishing on this moment. What are you most proud of professionally and personally?
Look, professionally, we've talked about our client results. So that's huge. But I think it was about 6 years ago, I created a vision board. I did a course and then did a vision board. And on that, I had that I was running a business where I can be where I want to be, and make an income, but also do something that helps people. I had no idea what it was as well. And everything that's on that is actually all come true. And I've created one for 5 years down the track now as well. But I'm just proud that if you do set your mind to something and you take action, you can do anything. And I'm just grateful that I trusted myself. Like it's very comfortable working and earning an income or a salary. But I took a leap. And if I hadn't have taken the leap and got the license, got the experience, got the training, as well as applied my own experience, then I may not have impacted people, but also I wouldn't be where I am today. So that's what I'm proud of, just taking a leap.
That's awesome. Yeah. So is there anything in that 5-year board that you did recently that you're willing to share so we can look back in 5 years and say, yeah, that's exactly what you said?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd never flown business class before. So yeah, I literally had the little capsule business class picture and I'm like, yeah, one day in the future. And literally on the 5-year mark, July last year, I booked a business class flight. I actually used points, so it actually was way cheaper. I probably wouldn't pay for it, but just having that experience of like, I actually did this. And it's that delayed gratification, right? Like I could have done it 5 years ago, but I worked towards it to a point where I was comfortable to fork out the money for that and treat myself.
It means so much more when you've worked hard to get to that point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's special. No, I love the work that you do. We've obviously helped some people together, which has been fantastic as well. And I'm really excited to see where the business goes for you and the advice side of it goes. So I'm pumped, and thanks for coming in today.
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of our community at That Backyard Property Podcast. We would love it if you could like, comment, or even share with a family member or a friend that might get something useful from today's episode. We can't wait to see you again next Tuesday.